All right, everybody. If it's Friday, that means we are on the road and our Locked On Summer Road Trip continues. Today, we're meeting up with Ann and Nick from Locked On Predators. This one's a little bit longer because when these two teams get together, there's such a rich history between them. And we could just go on and on and on. So stick around. Brand new episode crossover of Locked On Avalanche and Locked On Predators is coming at you.
Your Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome to Locked On Avalanche. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am Chris Maselli, your host. With me, as always, Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. Thank you for tuning in and making it your first listen of the day. Always appreciated. Make sure to follow us on our social media outlets, LOPN_Avalanche on Twitter, Twitter X. Yeah, Locked On Avalanche on Instagram. Questions, comments, concerns, opinions, lockedonavalanche@gmail.com. And follow us on our YouTube channel over on YouTube. Hit subscribe, get notified when a new show goes live. Definitely subscribe to our subtext as well. Link to that is in the show notes below. Subscribe and chat with Kyle and I one-on-one. There's no rundown on that end if you're watching on YouTube. That's because we're just doing a quick intro before we get into the crossover with Ann and Nick from Locked On Preds. We did record this earlier in the week. So, and this, we've done a few crossovers with these two over at Locked On Preds, and it's always a great conversation, especially this one that we're going to get to here in a second. But so much to get to for the offseason with the Preds. The Matt Duchene thing comes up, Ryan O'Reilly comes up, Tyson Barrie comes up. It's just there's a laundry list of players now who have played for both of these teams. And it doesn't seem like there's any end to it. And you get the Ryan Johansson thing, obviously. It's nonstop.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It gives you a little bit of insight on what to expect with Ryan Johansson. And we both get to commiserate about Tyson Barrie, Ryan O'Reilly, and Matt Duchene. So it's good input on both sides around players, current and former.
Yeah. So why don't we just dive right into it? It's a fun episode. It's a great way to end your week. Head into the weekend on a good note with a great crossover episode with Nick and Ann over at Locked On Preds. So enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in. I know the one that we had with Jason from Locked On Ducks got postponed. We might revisit that one next week if he's feeling better. So maybe we'll head back over to the West Coast next week. Still remains to be seen. But for now, great episode with us over here at Locked On Avalanche and Nick and Ann over at Locked On Predators. Enjoy it and enjoy the weekend.
Our Central Division Frenemy podcast series continues with our friends from Locked On Avalanche. Chris, Shaggy, a.k.a. Kyle. How you guys doing? Thanks for joining us.
Doing okay. Like we talked about on our episode on Monday that this was last week was an unplanned vacation for us. Like we planned to do our normal set of shows. Things just happened where we couldn't. So it was a nice week off. We're a little bit more rested and just another week closer to opening night puck drop. So this is the black hole of the off season, but we're slowly making our way through it. So it's almost over. We're almost there.
So close.
Yes.
But anything Avalanche, we're not supposed to be rested. We're supposed to be injured. That's what last week was. We were day to day all week last week.
There you go.
Yeah, I expect to see one of you just on this podcast with a cast or fighting through some massive leg injury right now.
Career ending, possibly, but not really.
Yeah. So somebody, maybe, no offense, much more important that we will ask about in kind of that same vein in a little bit. But first, I feel like the headline between our two teams was that little trade made right after the draft. Ryan Johansson going to the Colorado Avalanche for basically what would amounted to be a salary cap dump. Preds retained half of that salary. So what do you guys think about the addition of Ryan Johansson and how he's going to fit in that Avs lineup?
For me, it remains to be seen. I'm happy about it. I think it was a good move, but we still have to just play it out on the ice actually and see if it actually does work. But it was a move that they had to address that position, and it was something that they didn't wait around to do, which I think was the right thing, because the longer that went on and you don't address their 2C hole, then people are just asking all these questions like, why are you not addressing this? It was one of the very first things that they did. So you got that out of the way. I don't know. I think I like it. It's so funny how when it happened, there was a little smattering of Avalanche fans who said, "Oh, now we can get that guy. Maybe he can stick his hockey stick into other goalies' masks now." Like, and I'm like, oh, come on. Like, there are some people that think he deliberately did that, and that if you can deliberately do that, he would
have had
great.
so many more goals.
Oh my, yeah. Oh my God.
It would have been the best stick move he made all season.
I mean, that's just brilliant if you could do that. But we were not on that page, just so everybody knows. So, and that was just like I said, it was, and I don't think those people like honestly meant it. I think they genuinely are happy that it seems like it's shored up, like that position. Mm-hmm. Is it Nazem Kadri 2.0? I don't know. I don't think so. But what Nazem Kadri gave you for the first handful of seasons, I think Ryan Johansson can do that. I don't think he can do what Nazem Kadri did in his last year with the Avalanche, 80-something points and go off. They don't really need him to do that, although they would not say no to that. But they just need him to be a solid presence in the center position for the second line and not really move from there. I think he can at least give him that.
When it came to the end of the season and how it ended, it wasn't ceremonious. And then when you looked at how the 2C position was addressed with Nazem Kadri leaving, it was kind of, we'll promote from within. And that was Alex Newhook last year. And he finished the year on the fourth line. Like, it's one of those that method didn't work. And going into the offseason, it was, what are we going to do about 2C? That was the number one question. With the Ryjo move, it answered that question. And like Chris said, it might not be a Nazem Kadri 2.0, but the potential is there. He knows what he's doing. You know what you're getting. You don't have to guess on who's playing 2C tonight. You don't have to ride the hot hand. You know what you have at 2C, and you can build around that. And I think that's what the Avs are looking for going into this season. You have that question answered.
Yeah. Can I make you guys feel more optimistic about this?
I was gonna get your take on it. I kind of wanted to know, like, what was the reason? I mean, the reasoning was a salary dump, but the fact that he's gone, does it hurt your team? Like, give me. We're getting as much info from the people in the know that watch him way more than we do. Get their feedback on it. So yes, please go ahead.
This is my take on it. And I think Nick and I may differ a little bit on this, because I had a very different take on Ryan Johansson end of the season, which of course, he missed the end of the season with his, cut leg skate injury, kerfuffle, which was just awful. But in the post-game locker room cleanout, we got a chance to talk with him. And it seemed like a very hungry Ryan Johansson, y'all. Like, I think it was extremely hard on him and some of the other veterans too, but I really felt it from Ryan Johansson and the things that he was saying. He was very inspired by the way the young Predators had played down the stretch, trying to remain competitive. But this was a guy who was hungry to get back out there. And it just... For me, I was most disappointed about this move because I wanted to see what came next for Ryan Johansson, because I felt like this is somebody who is really hungry. And when his back is against the wall, when Ryan Johansson is asked to prove it, he's a player who can. You know, kind of the same thing happened when he was unprotected in the expansion draft with the Seattle Kraken. And then he came back in and he had this great season. So if I'm y'all, I'm feeling okay about this Ryan Johansson thing because I think he is coming in very hungry. I think this move is going to increase that. And I think it's a prove it thing. And I don't think he's going to disappoint. I really don't.
So Anne added some optimism. Can now I add some pessimism?
No, we moved past that part. Yeah.
Well, we got 30 minutes to fill, so I'm going to do it. The thing with Ryan Johansson is, I agree. When Anne said that he was hungry at the end, it was one of the best sound bites I've ever heard from a locker cleanout. Was he said, I think a lot of these young players, kind of think they're coming, they're going to start taking over spots.
Come on,
I'm here to prove that it's not going to be a cakewalk to them. He was then traded, so it's going to be a cakewalk for them. But the thing about Ryan Johansson and Barrie Trotz, when he took over, was very transparent in saying, it's like, look, this is a game that's getting faster. This is a game in where kind of your top 9 needs to have speed, needs to have some element of quickness, especially down the middle. And quite frankly, that's not Ryan Johansson's game. Barrie Trotz is very transparent in saying that. This is also a player who's now had a couple of major leg injuries, and this is a player who has underperformed for 3 of the last 4 seasons. So right. I think and I'll say this, I think Ryan Johansson certainly has a role. I think especially with, a team like the Colorado Avalanche, where he is going to be surrounded by a lot of really good players. He's not going to have to do everything himself. He certainly has a role. But if you're counting on him to kind of be that consistent number 2, like depth scoring guy, that's going to be a tough ask for Johansson at this stage of his career and what he's shown over the past couple of seasons. He might need some more help, maybe more than the Avalanche have right now.
Who is he going to be playing with?
Well, we've done some episodes on kind of guessing what the lines are going to be. And for this year, with Gabe Landeskog obviously being out all year, and on any other team, Mikko Rantanen is a top line guy. And right. I think like Jared Bednar loves to mix and match and move things around. He has no problems doing that at the drop of a hat, mid-game, doesn't matter. I think to start the season, Mikko Rantanen is going to be on the top line. That's just where he deserves to be. It's where he's comfortable playing with Nathan MacKinnon. But there are some people who feel like split them up, get top end talent on 2 lines. So it could be Mikko Rantanen on the second line. Again, I don't see that to start the season, but he likely will be with Val Nichushkin on one end. And that's another, it could be Artturi Lehkonen on another wing. That could be a second line right there. So there's so many different mixes and matches that they can do. Who else, Kyle? I mean, who else could be on that other wing?
I would think there would be a Lehkonen and Nichushkin. Again, to Chris's point, the Avalanche run defense a little bit different too. You also run the risk of having like Sam Girard, a familiar name to you guys as well.
Yes, we know.
He will take the puck and he will drive it deep and he will skate around the goal, and everybody has to cover those positions to where Ryjo doesn't have to be skating the entire length of the ice. He can kind of camp on the blue line for a little bit. He doesn't have to get all the way down there. So it depends on defensive pairings. I feel like you will get a better grasp on who works well with who, depending on speed, because Nichushkin, he's fast, but he's freight train fast. Once he gets there, there's no stopping him, but it takes a while to get there. So if you have Ryan Johansson doing the same, you might want to shake that up a little bit, which is why I like Chris's idea about Mikko on that second line as well. So about after your first 5 to 10 games, you'll have a really good idea on who's working well with who.
And I think a big wild card here is Jonathan Drouin. that
Yeah.
they sign out. Like you just don't know what. There's so many people out there that think that he is just going to start on that top line because he's buddies with Nathan McKinnon. Doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way, and I don't think that works in Jared Bednar's house either. He will be given opportunities to do that, so that's why it's a tough question to solidify an answer right now, because they do have some questions on where those guys will fit. But whatever it's going to be on game 1, it is not going to be that way on game 3 or game 4. Like, they're going to use the preseason and probably the first couple weeks to a month of the season to really see what lines work the best. And even then, it's not going to be set in stone, just because he loves doing it. He just loves giving opposition like different looks all the time.
Yeah.
But the Avalanche also have the opportunity of players that get to play with Ryjo and not have to play. They also have that depth working for them as well. So they have a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah. One more question, and then we'll transition into some Preds talk. And it's somebody that you mentioned, and that's Jonathan Drouin, because this guy, to me, this is going to sound like a hot take, was one of the more interesting names on the free agent market. You know, we talk about him just not having a good scoring year, 2 goals, but he did have a decent number of assists. And as Ann and I have pointed out on our podcast, would have been 4th on the Preds in assists last year.
Wow.
I mean, this to me seems like kind of a low risk, high reward kind of signing for the Avalanche. I mean, do you guys see him maybe unlocking some of the magic that he had back in Tampa Bay or some of his early years with Montreal?
You can look last year at what they did with Evan Rodriguez. He's getting paid now because of his contributions in Colorado last year. I have the exact same feeling. It's the same project with Jonathan Drouin. It's low risk, high reward. If it doesn't go well, oh well. It's not really hurting the team that much.
I'm still in a wait and see approach with him. I think I mentioned before that a lot of people are thinking just because he's matched back up with Nathan McKinnon, it's like we got the band back together, and like no, it's the league is why he is struggling so much. You know, it's not like he had a great career with Nathan McKinnon because it was a different league. He just performed well in that league. This is the NHL. It's just, but there is something to be said about just, new environment, new system, new team. Like there is something to be said about that. So because of that, I'm kind of holding out hope that, maybe they can pull out of him what was always expected of him and what he hasn't been able to accomplish really like for the majority of his career. But like you're saying, it is, they signed him for nothing, next to nothing. Mm-hmm. But the other side of it is if he does have this coming out party, does he now spurn the Avalanche? Because they only signed him for a year. Mm-hmm. So now you're back in this whole boat next year, and everybody, especially including the Avalanche, are up against the cap again next year. So did they create a problem for themselves by not signing him to maybe a 3-year deal at that number? I don't even know if that's something that he would want to do. Maybe he wants to have a prove it year for himself so he can go cash in maybe the following year. There's so many moving parts to this, from the back end, from like the monetary and obviously on ice stuff. And I have faith in the Avalanche system, Jared Bednar's system, that he can put guys in there that are like Jonathan Drouin and get something out of them. So I will say that. I will say, like, I am looking forward to seeing what they can pull out of him, because they've kind of hit pay dirt with some guys seasons before. Valenchuskin, everybody wants to go back to that. Everybody wants to say, look what they did with Valenchuskin, and just think like that's a miracle pill that they got and it's going to work for everybody. We'll see. We'll see. It's a wait and see for me.
And I'm pretty sure this it's kind of the quiet conversation around Jonathan Drouin, but if it doesn't work in Colorado, where will it work?
Right.
And I think he has that understanding that, hey, you have the Nathan McKinnon factor, you have the Colorado Avalanche factor. If you can't make it work here, where are you going to find your next contract? So I think that's also in his mind going into this year. So I would expect for him to really be playing for the rest of his NHL career in this season.
Talked about Ryan Johansson being motivated. It sounds like Jonathan Duran's motivated too. And there are a lot of players on the Nashville Predators roster that are going to be motivated this season. We'll talk about the Preds offseason changes, plus good news for you guys, Avs fans, about the NHL cover. But maybe also some bad news. There might be a curse associated with that.
You're a good news, bad news guy. Like
I know how to.
You're a compliment sandwich, is what they call that. Right?
Yeah. Do what I can.
Sour Patch Kid.
Yeah. Except I'm sour all the time. You know what's not sour? The deals that you can find on FanDuel, who are sponsoring today's show. Football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long, because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time the team you pick to Super Bowl wins during the regular season. So, for instance, if you pick the Titans or Broncos to win the Super Bowl, number one, what are you doing? Number two, if they do pull out a win during the regular season, you get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, we are continuing our Central Division Frenemy series with Chris and Kyle from Locked On Avs. The Preds are chock full of old Avs players, Ryan O'Reilly and Tyson Barrie, just to name a few. So our next question is, I guess, are there any players you can think of from like 2013 to 2016 that are going to be future Preds here in a little bit?
Francois Beauchemin, are you doing anything?
We were kind of just before we hit record, just kind of reminiscing on that, and for some reason these two teams are connected in so many ways. Not just that they play in the same division, they just seem to either make trades, make deals, sign free agents. Just they're just in and out. There's 1 degree of separation between these teams, and
it's the sister wives of the NHL, friend.
That's crazy. But I think the one that Kyle and I want to know, and what Avalanche fans want to know about most, is our old friend Matt Duchene. What happened there? Did everyone did you see that coming? And maybe this goes to the Ryan Johansson thing too. Mm-hmm. When did Barrie Trotz kind of make this known, like this stuff was going to be happening like during the season, or because he didn't really take over until like after the draft, right? Isn't that really like when he officially took over? So was he not really playing his or showing his cards during the season, and then once the draft was over, he started doing this stuff, and the stuff being like what he did with Matt Duchene?
So Barrie Trotz was really working alongside David Poile, I think, from really January on. So he was involved in a lot of the conversations. Right. I don't know that, he was necessarily ppulling all the strings at that point, but he was very, they kept everything real kind of quiet about what they were doing until the trade deadline. And you just didn't have to be Scooby-Doo once they dealt Mattias Ekholm to realize what was happening, and Nino Niederreiter and, everybody's firstborn for Tanner Jeannot, so you knew that something big was coming. You also knew that those 2 $8 million contracts were a bane of the existence of Nashville Predators fans. That was kind of their middle name, Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene, $8 million centers. So it always has been kind of a thing. I will say that Barrie Trotz called Ryan Johansson out at the end of the season press conference about his speed and coming back. So, I would say for me, anything was possible once the trade deadline hit. Like, I felt like, okay, Barrie Trotz, nothing is going to happen at this trade deadline that Barrie Trotz doesn't know about, is not in on. So anything felt possible. I will still say when they traded Johansson, I thought that bought Matt Duchene maybe a little bit of time, but it didn't. And it came with some interesting comments from Barrie Trotz, who talked about wanting a reset in the locker room.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So,
You heard, as Ann referenced, Barrie Trotz really say, like, this was an extension of everything that happened at the trade deadline, where they're kind of just wanting to change the culture and just get some new voices in that locker room. I think the Duchene thing was a surprise because of what the Preds had to do to get him off the roster. Like, they bought out 3 more years at $8 million per year. That is not easy pocket money for a lot of NHL teams, including the Preds, who already still have the Kyle Turris buyout on the books.
Yeah.
They have part of Matthias Ekholm's salary retained. They had just retained $4 million of Ryan Johansson's deal. And now all of a sudden you have dead cap for the next 6 seasons. That says a lot about Barrie Trotz being like, there's more value in not having Matt Duchene here than there is in keeping him. And I think that really kind of said something without just outright saying something.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, and you're touching on it, because I think all Avalanche fans kind of want to know the same thing. Two questions. One, Matt Duchene's voice in the locker room. Did he sing everything? 2, was like you bought out Matt Duchene for the next 3 years. That's a steep buyout.
6 years, right?
It's 6 years of dead cap.
It's of dead cap, right?
Of dead cap.
Or you bought other. I get what you're saying, Kyle. Go ahead. Yeah.
And was it really that bad?
Yeah.
No.
This is like, it's a head scratcher to me a little bit.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
We're not Matt Duchene apologists here.
Right.
We are also former Matt Duchene team.
Yeah.
But
just trying to figure this out.
And that's I think the thing that a lot of people who are kind of against this move said is, look, this guy a year ago had 86 points.
Exactly.
Even last year, he was the Preds' leading goal scorer, had like 50, I think it was 53 points in 71 games, which, I mean, it's a drop off, but it's still decent. And as you're going into the season with all of these new players and all of these up and coming sort of prospects you want to get, somebody like Matt Duchene scoring is still something you would love to kind of have there with you. And as you know, you mentioned, like, you're probably not going to compete for the Stanley Cup within the next 3 years, and you're not up against the cap at all either. So kind of what's the point of buying out the last 3 years rather than just keeping an asset who can still give you something on the team? Like that's kind of the argument against getting rid of Duchene. And that's I think sort of the big question that a lot of people are asking. And maybe that does kind of tell you something about what the locker room culture was.
Do you feel that it's a coincidence that he stayed in the division? Is this one of those things where it's, he didn't want this to happen? Like he picked where he wanted to go. I think that was the first contract that he got to pick where he wanted to go. And do you think he stayed in the division to face off against the Predators as much as possible during the season and kind of stick it to him another way and go to a team that is expected to contend for a cup?
I mean,
yes.
Okay.
Just say yes.
I mean, now it caused a huge ruckus in Nashville. Some comments that he made about, I've never been on a team that has been competing for the Stanley Cup. I've just never had that experience.
We know. We know that.
Yeah. And in Nashville, everybody's like, hey, dude, what's the, what's the common denominator? But I see his point. He really hasn't, timing wise, like the Nashville Predators weren't going to get there. I think he has I think that he's going to want to stick it to the man. I really think Matt Duchene, when he comes back, is going to want to stick it to the man. Mm-hmm. I think he did not want to go. He did not want to leave Nashville. I think he felt very comfortable that he wasn't going to probably leave Nashville. He did say when the move happened with Ryan Johansson, he was like, I might want to keep my antenna up. This is, something's happening. Here's what I will say. There were in that locker room with these young players that the Predators had at the end of the season, there were some different leadership voices in there. Colton Sissons, UC Saros, who is such a quiet man, but had some things to say. Tyson Barrie, who we all know and love, or don't love.
Oh yeah. I'm a Barrie fan.
Adore him.
Yeah.
They say he has mom energy, which I'm like, I'm here for this. But I think they liked those voices in the locker room. And Ryan O'Reilly, Gus Nyquist, these guys they brought in, the word is culture and leadership. And I think if you're Matt Duchene, you are walking away from Nashville feeling a little bit like they're saying some things without saying some things. True or not, that's the vibe.
Daryl Sittler is famous for that 10-point game as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. December 23rd, Predators versus Stars at Bridgestone Arena. Matt Duchene, I think, is going to be poised to break that record. He's doing everything he can to just score 15 points in that game.
FanDuel that, baby, is what you're saying?
Yeah. FanDuel the over on Matt Duchene.
Wow.
Yeah, it felt like they asked Tyson Barrie and Ryan O'Reilly to check the references on Matt Duchene, and he was shown the door.
Yeah, it's crazy to think like this is his 5th team.
Yeah.
Matt Duchene. That is just crazy to me. And you guys are saying things like, you're really not expected to compete in the next 3 years or whatever, however you feel. How did they attract someone like Ryan O'Reilly then? How did they, what was what do you think the reasoning is O'Reilly wanted to go there coming from Toronto? I don't know if Toronto was really, I don't know. I didn't keep up with what Toronto was doing, so I don't know if they were trying to bring him back. And I'm not trying to minimize what's going on in Nashville. They have a great fan base and are always in the
mix. We know who we are. We know where we are.
So I mean, but right now, as it stands today, if you're giving me the options between Toronto and Nashville, and they both want my services, I'm probably going to Toronto. Yeah. So, I thought that it's a good signing. It's a pretty good number, but for a guy who's 32, almost 33, those guys around that age kind of start looking around to say, like, where can I go make one more run before I'm on the downside if I'm not there already? I was a little surprised to see that signing. I think it's a good signing for them, but I did not think Ryan O'Reilly was going to go to Nashville.
Well, I can say 4-year contract, and then that kind of ends the
conversation
right there.
Yeah, right.
And money. Money is great.
Sure.
The other thing I think with Ryan O'Reilly is he's probably going to get a chance to play a more prominent role in Nashville than he maybe would have in Toronto or Pittsburgh. That was another team that was kind of, rumored to be kicking the tires. A lot of people kind of penned him as a support guy. Sort of maybe, fringe second line, maybe a good third line player like he was in the playoffs for Toronto. But in Nashville, he's going to get a chance to kind of go back to being the guy. We think he's going to be maybe starting the season as the number 1 center, maybe dropping down to number 2 just in case Barry Trotz wants to split up him and Philip Forsberg. And the other thing is I just think he's got a chance to play with some young talent. And this is something that he brought up when he did his press conference here in Nashville. He's going to be playing alongside guys like Luke Evangelista, Phil Tomasino, eventually somebody like Joachim Kamel, like the top offensive prospects in the Preds system, looking for a guy like O'Reilly to maybe shore up some of the defensive responsibilities so they can go and do their thing. And I do think that kind of situation maybe can revitalize a player like O'Reilly, who's, kind of played with the same teammates over the past little bit. You saw how revitalized he was playing in Toronto. Going to a place like Nashville, you're playing with a lot of hungry young players with something to prove. We saw that at the end of the season last year for Nashville, how well a lot of these young guys did and how guys like, Tyson Barrie and Ryan McDonough elevated their games to play with them. I do think somebody like Ryan O'Reilly looks at that and says, this is a chance to kind of step in and revitalize my career playing with players who have something to prove.
Could be. Yeah. Go ahead, Kyle, if you got anything.
Yeah, it's interesting at least, but when you talk about 4 years, I mean, Nashville's a great place to be. You're not, like you said, you're not going to be contending for a cup, but that's a team that it's okay to not contend for a cup because there's a lot of cultivating and growing, and it's a great environment, great fans. You're not the Toronto media. It's one of those things that if you're not winning the cup, you're getting grilled in the off season. And in Nashville, everybody understands we're building something here. So
True.
If I'm Ryan O'Reilly, that might be a little bit more comfortable, especially in that stage of life. Like, I think I could be okay being in Nashville instead of having to prove myself year after year after year in Toronto and still not making it.
Yeah. And I think you're saying everybody here in Nashville, like, we know who we are. For the last 3 or 4 seasons, ever since that Stanley Cup run, it's been this, hey, we're going to add 1 or 2 pieces and we're going to be right back in contention. And that's never unfolded. It's crystal clear right now. Everybody knows in Nashville where the Predators are. We are developing some young players. We're bringing in some veterans to help along. We are not going to be in cup contention. If we make the playoffs, it's going to be by the hair on our chinny chin chins, and it's going to take a lot of other things going our way. But the thing is, I think the fans in Nashville and players like Ryan O'Reilly are okay with that because you really do know where you stand. And I think there's been a lot of frustration in the locker room and in the fan base being sold a different bill of goods than what really could transpire on the ice. So I think it is a better place. And I think you're onto something when you're talking about the media pressure as well. We're laid back here in Nashville. We just love y'all.
You mentioned Forsberg briefly. And God, like he's an Avalanche killer. Like whenever he plays against Colorado, he just seems to perform, which is no surprise. I'm sure he does that against the other 30 teams as well. What's going on with him? I know he's technically injured reserve right now, right? And I should hate that guy more than I do. Like I said, the way he plays against Colorado, he's just one of those guys that has their number and just plays well. You know, when baseball players just hit well against a team or hit well in a park, he just plays well against Colorado. And you watch interviews with him, and he just seems like a really cool guy. And
he is.
The mustache.
It's the stash. It is totally the stash. So what's going on with him? What are they expecting him back start of the season? Is everything on par for that?
So according to Barrie Trotz, yes. He had the dreaded upper body injury at the end of last year, which I think everybody can kind of read between the lines and know what that is. So, according to Barrie Trotz, he's on track to come back next year. There's maybe some whispers that, hey, if the Preds got into the playoffs last year, maybe he would have been kind of ready to go. That was sort of the rumors. Nothing really confirmed about that. But, that's a player that the Predators need to stay healthy. And that maybe is kind of contributing to the Predators' scoring woes, is that Forsberg quite simply hasn't been able to stay healthy the past couple of years. Look, if the Predators want any chance of making a surprise playoff run, at this point, it's got to start with Philip Forsberg.
Yeah.
Because who else is going to do that up front? And it's funny also because you look at, kind of the way Andy Burnett runs things, you may not get like another 97-point season from Roman Josi. He's still going to be one of the best best offensive defensemen in the NHL. Don't get me wrong. He just may not be the guy that facilitates every play. To me, that's got to be Philip Forsberg. That's the guy that's got to take the reins and take control. But it's got to start with him being healthy, something he hasn't been able to do for the past few seasons.
Yeah. And we've talked to, on our show about Philip Forsberg. This is kind of his season to be the guy. For a long time, it was – we called it the Jofa line: Ryan Johansson, Victor Arvidsson, and Philip Forsberg. And those three were fantastic during that Stanley Cup run, the next President's year. And then he was with Matt Duchene. And so they kind of were the guys. Well, now Philip Forsberg is the guy. And so it's kind of his team. And Barrie Trotz is really counting on him offensively as being like a core player. Like, you're going to be the guy that carries this team offensively. So, that's the role that he has this season. If he can stay healthy, hopefully he can do it.
Well, Nashville Predators fans, I'll let you know, when you get rid of Shane, Nathan McKinnon got better. So
good things happen.
Good things might happen for people stepping up to be the guy.
Maybe.
And I can say this: the best Forsberg to ever play in a Predators uniform.
Whoa! Slow down there, Ghost Rider.
do want to ask you guys one question. So, of course, the NHL 24 cover athlete was announced. It is Cale Makar.
Congratulations.
Congrats. I guess
I did so much to make that
I did everything.
Well done, guys.
we can see the hard work and dedication that went into there. I'm wondering if you guys are aware of the NHL Madden style curse.
I mean, well aware of the Madden curse. I don't know too much about the NHL cover curse.
So it's not necessarily player specific, but this was tweeted out by Jay Fresh today.
Okay.
In the past 27 editions of the EA Sports NHL game, dating all the way back to 1997, only 2 players and their teams have moved on past the first round of the playoffs.
Wow.
Only twice in the past 27 years. And only one player in history, which was Patrick Kane in NHL 10, actually won the cup that year. So I guess my question is there a witch doctor or somebody in the Denver area that you guys have on speed dial that can give the good vibes to Cale Makar or the EA franchise?
Well, I could say firsthand, last year was Trevor Zegras and Sarah Nurse asking a lot.
That's true.
You're asking a lot there. And honestly, in the EA's NHL covers, they have been very up and down with who they select. This feels like finally the first one that everybody's like, yes, finally. When it comes to curses, this is one of the things that go with the Avalanche mentality. We'll knock that expectation down too. Like if that's kind of the talk around it, it's like, okay, fine, we'll take care of this, and it's going to be asked of Cale Makar, and Cale Makar is going to answer it in the most sweetest way, where it doesn't affect him, it doesn't bother him, and they're going to keep doing Avalanche things.
I first of all, who comes up with that stuff? Like who realizes that only 2 players made it past the first round? I'm just always continually amazed by that stuff. But I think this is well, not this year, it's not, but I think it's a good season for this to happen again, based on what happened to the Avalanche last year. That is going to be in the back of their mind all year long, and then once they get to the playoffs, they're going to have a chip on their shoulder. They did not play the way they wanted to against Seattle. It was Seattle got them out of their game. Going in 0 for on the power play didn't help the entire series, but so could he become the 3rd player? Sure, but I think it's just a culmination of everything that happened last year and all those injuries that they had. Just moving on beyond it, but I continue to be amazed at how Cale Makar is creeping up, and maybe some people think he has even passed Nathan MacKinnon in popularity, because Kyle and I have talked many times about this EA cover thing before it comes out. And the guy that we always tout as being like deserving of all this stuff is Nathan MacKinnon. And it is shifting to Cale Makar now. He is becoming that guy that is becoming like the popularity thing is kind of going in his direction. And I don't know if it's just because he's a little bit younger and the younger crowd can relate to him because of his age, or it's just because he's got that baby face and it reminds them of like their brother or something. But he just seems a little bit more relatable. He is a nicer guy. Nathan MacKinnon is a bear. He doesn't give you good interviews. He's just focused on performing from the time he wakes up to the time he goes to bed. And Cale Makar is a little bit more fun-loving and freewheeling. And then when he gets out on the ice, it's like, holy crap, look at the stuff he's doing out there. So I was a bit surprised that Cale Makar kind of beat Nathan MacKinnon out to be on the cover, but he's just as deserving as MacKinnon is. So
yeah,
we'll see what he can do.
Who's more valuable to the Avs? Which one of those are more valuable?
I'll tell you Cale Makar right now.
Why?
Wow.
Honestly, we've Cale Makar is a generational talent. He is changing not just the current state of the NHL, but the future prospects and the young kids watching Cale Makar play and how you handle defense and the skills you need to really thrive in this game. Whenever you talk about Nathan MacKinnon, there's the Austin Matthews, the Connor McDavids. He has his peers. Find an equivalent to Cale Makar. I dare you.
I mean, there's no wrong answer there. And I think whoever you go with, it's a razor thin margin. But Cale Makar is making playing defense cool again, or the defensive position.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like how Steph Curry. There I go with the Golden State Warriors again, Kyle. I don't know why I mentioned the Golden State Warriors so much on our show.
I have a tally.
It's
That's
crazy.
19.
Yeah. Like how Steph Curry made shooting threes cool. Cale Makar has kind of made like the defensive position cool again. And for that reason, I don't know, man, that is such a tough question because they bring so much to this team. Mm-hmm. You take away one of those guys and they clearly are not the same team. I tend to lean a little bit towards Nathan MacKinnon just because when he gets on a roll, it's just fun to watch. The same can be said for Cale Makar. It's those two guys they're invaluable to the Avalanche right now, both of them.
Yeah. You guys have Cale Makar. We have Roman Josi, two players who have just absolutely put up video game numbers.
Yeah.
Erik Karlsson with San Jose last year, now with Pittsburgh, of course, had the 100-point season. Does it feel like with this kind of group of players, we're kind of going back to those Ray Bourque, Phil Housley kind of days where the defensemen are just kind of more freewheeling, maybe a little less, just stay at the blue line, maybe a little bit more involved in the play?
100%. Yeah. And that is, if you don't do that as a defender on the Avalanche team, you're probably not going to be there or you're not going to get a lot of ice time. And even guys like Curtis McDermott, who are out there for one thing, he'll engage. And his offensive, I don't want to say his offensive game has increased because it hasn't, but his attempts, like he's trying. He's not just out there to just throw his weight around, which is he does it. But if he's got a lane and an opportunity, he's going to take it. And that's what they want him to do. It's not like he's going to take a shot and then get back to the bench and the coaches are going to be like, what the heck are you doing out there? Leave that to the McKinnons of the world. No, if you got a shot, take it. And that's true for really every defender on this team. And I think it is going across the league too, where it's not that hang out on the blue line, it's engage, and your teammates have to realize that. And then a forward needs to cycle back and take your place. It's a science now and how they run offenses now. And I love watching. I love this style of play. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You could see the players like Cale Makar and Josi and this new quicker, how you handle defense. Those are the guys you sign, you hold on to, you keep. Everybody else, like a Nikita Zadorov, like a Eric Johnson, like those are the ones you manage and you sign for 1 year, $1 million deals. That's the way the NHL is going. It's like when fighting was phased out of the league, when those enforcers were just kind of floating. Cody McLeod, he was just kind of floating around without a place, without a role, because it wasn't there anymore. That's how the defense is starting to shift and how you're playing the game. You're wanting these quarterbacks that can take the ball and scramble if they have to.
And I think that's a huge reason why they didn't bring, you mentioned Eric Johnson, Kyle. I think that's why they didn't bring him back. Mm-hmm. He's not that type of guy. He's the old school type of, like he'll play defense and he'll play it relatively well, but he's not going to give you that offensive ability. And for them to not bring him back, he is Mr. Avalanche, even more so than Gabe Landeskog. So I think it was very telling that they were not going to bring him back because he just doesn't fit their system anymore. It's the way it's going.
Yeah. Interesting to say the least, but I agree with you. I think it's extremely fun. I love that style. I hope it stays. It's kind of funny just how the NHL, twists and turns over the years. I remember the Bruins and Kings won the cup there at the 2010s, and it's all about, goaltending and structure and, winning the hard way. We've had the Avs, we've had, Tampa, and, Vegas last year. Kind of seems like maybe we're going back towards maybe a little bit more free flowing style. And that's going to be fun as hell to watch.
What do you think about goaltending? Because even goaltending, it's no longer that workhorse goalie. Like, you got to have a tandem. You have to.
You don't think Aiden Hill is that workhorse?
No. Me and Adam from Locked On Lightning, we talk about this all the time. He's got the workhorse over in Tampa. So of course he doesn't feel like they need to have like this duo and this tandem, because what they have is otherworldly. But for the rest, where the rest of the league is going, is you got to have those guys that are ready to go and take a good chunk of that workload. You're not splitting it 50-50, but you got to spell these guys that are your A1s. You have to.
It's interesting, talking about that as we look at the Nashville Predators, because, we have UC Saros, and UC Saros, he usually in the last 2 seasons, I think, has tied or beaten Connor Hellebuck for most games played. This is a guy who is in net a lot. But last season they signed Kevin Lankinen, and y'all, even though Lankinen did not play, but I don't know what he played, 12, 14 games, something like that. It mattered that he was who you had in net, the year before that. And we love him. We're big fans. We think he's delightful, but David Riddick is not necessarily your 1B. I'm just saying, so even in teams like Nashville, where UC Saros is going to get the start, he is going to be in net so much of the time, he's going to play a ton of minutes. You still do have to have that backup who can step in and still steal a game or win a game. It is. I think you're right. It's becoming a tandem. It's a tandem league.
Yeah. And regardless on what side of the coin you fall on do you need your stalwart goalie or do you need a tandem? Connor Hellebuck's deal's up at the end of this year. Yeah. See how much he signs for and where. That'll tell you where the league is going.
And that's interesting too, because Colorado, you guys won last year with Darcy Kemper and Francouz kind of just going based on vibes in the playoffs as who was going to get that start. You saw what Vegas did last year, and it's going to be interesting to see if teams are willing to pay $9-10 million to somebody like Hellebuck, or for us, God forbid it comes to that, gives up a big package of, I'm just saying, Ann.
I saw
give up a big package of picks and prospects for somebody like UC Saros, or if they're more of like what Vegas did and be like, as long as we get like a couple of above average and just get a rotation going, we can kind of piece together something. So it's going to be interesting to see which direction that goes.
That's where the Avalanche are at. They are not going to overpay for a goalie, and they've proven it twice now with Darcy Kemper and Philip Grubauer. They will they'll go up to a certain amount.
To his point, you pay 2 goalies, which you would pay 1 normally.
Yeah,
we have the hardware back here to show that does work.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I broke up there, but you knew where I was going with that. Like, if you don't want to play for this X amount, we'll go find someone that's just serviceable. We'll put an awesome team in front of him, and all he has to do is just play okay. And they think they can win that way, and they have been. So it's kind of where they're going with goalie position.
Your camera dropping out and Kyle picking it up. That's the importance of having a tandem that can do it all. Right there.
There it is.
Yeah. Well, you guys, Locked On Avs, you guys are always a ton of fun, and we love doing crossovers with you. I'm sure talk during the season.
Oh yeah.
Until we get there, give us a pitch. Where can our listeners find your work?
Over on Twitter, you can follow us on the social media outlets over there, LOPN_Avalanche. Or I always call it Twitter X now, whatever they want to call it. So, and same thing on Instagram is just Locked On Avalanche. Obviously our YouTube page, subscribe to that. And then Kyle has his own Twitter page, which you can follow, which is
at Shaggy Von Doom. Tighten up, by the way.
Gotta love it.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Awesome.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you guys can find us at LO_Predators on X or whatever that's called now. Yeah. But yeah.
I can't wait till it goes
X,
away,
as
to be totally honest with you.
represent. And you guys be sure to subscribe to our YouTube too. Just search Locked On Predators and you'll find us. Make sure whichever side of the team fan base you guys are joining us at, guys, subscribe to both shows and tune in for new episodes later this week. We'll see you then, everybody.
All right.
Have a good day.